Action.
Okay, welcome everyone. Here we're going to interview our beloved colleague, Dennis. And the aim of the interview is to try to bring it together and to take a kind of wider perspective on grammar teaching and learning. And we wanted to get some of Dennis's insights in that regard. So we have a set of questions that we'd like to ask you,
Sure.
and that's how we'll proceed. So,
Okay.
Thanks.
Let's start with our first question then. Dennis, how would you describe the process of grammar learning?
Okay, the process of grammar learning, that's a huge question, but thanks for mentioning we're looking at this holistically, Dave. I think you guys, my beloved colleagues, as you said, you're my beloved colleagues, have done a great job on the course so far, focusing on a whole range of aspects of grammar teaching. I think one of the most important things is that, in terms of the learning, it's really difficult to know what grammar learning involves for each and every individual student. And I find it really difficult, therefore, to generalize what this process involves. Having said that, however, I think there are a wide variety of factors which may have an influence on grammar learning, the process of grammar learning. So these are things like the age of the student, their proficiency level, their own learning preferences and expectations, the instructional approaches used by the teacher, because those are bound to have an effect on the process itself, the materials used or not used, the students' previous learning experiences, and maybe also the teacher's previous teaching experiences, I don't know. So going back to the question, how would I describe the process of grammar learning? I think it's both a complicated and challenging process, but if I had to give, not to leave our teachers without an answer, so to speak, I think it's very much based on the lexical approach, and something that Michael Lewis, way back in 1993, I'm sure most, if not all of our teachers are familiar with the name Michael Lewis, said and worked on and proposed based on this approach, saying that language is grammaticalized lexis and not lexicalized grammar. I'll say that one more time. Language is grammaticalized lexis, not lexicalized grammar. Now, what does that mean? It means that lexis or vocab is at the center of learning, and that grammar is sort of put in or added on or embedded later on into the vocab, into whatever the student is trying to express. Now, that might still not be clear, so I'll refer to my own French experience of learning and progressing in French, and then later trying to relearn things. It is with vocab that I start. It's the vocab that comes to my mind. But I get extremely frustrated if I can't put the grammar in there. So I have the vocab is great, and I have high retention rates. But the grammar, and I'm just talking about speaking, by the way. I'm not even referring to writing. Writing makes it even more challenging. So just that experience, I'm not going to go into more details because we have more questions. So from my own learning experience as well, I know that the core is the lexis, but you can't do without grammar. And I know many students I've taught, and from the observations, they get frustrated when they can't get the grammar right. So I think, that to me is what the process of grammar learning involves. I hope I answered.
Thank you very much.
Maybe that's why students find it more difficult to learn grammar. They can learn lexis easily, but it takes more time for them to.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
as someone with a small child currently learning her first language, you can really see that the vocabulary is coming
Yeah.
first and her grammar is often very muddled. But you know,
Of course, you're experiencing it every day.
yeah. But you know, it's coming.
Mm.
I'm sure her grammar will improve. So let's move on to the second question, Dennis. Can you briefly explain the role of grammar instruction in language learning?
Okay, so maybe based on what I said in response to the first question, I think it is, I mean, grammar instruction is and has to be a core part of language learning. There's no getting away from it. But what is crucial is, I believe, how it is viewed, how it is perceived in terms of how it is taught. So the teacher's perceptions here in terms of how grammar should be taught, needs to be taught, is really important. So it has to be a core part. At the same time, I think it's equally important that we don't see grammar instruction as grammar lessons, that we see it as grammar focused lessons. Now I'm going to underline that because to me in my own teaching as well that is key. Why is this important? So let me say that again, not teaching grammar lessons, but grammar focused lessons. What does that make you think of? Well, it means we can't teach grammar on its own, we have to bring in the other skills, right? So we have to bring in speaking, reading, listening, writing, depending on, you know, what the grammar structures are, etc. We have to bring in exposure, we have to bring in practice, and all of that. So the role of grammar instruction, therefore, can, you know, really encompasses and should involve teaching grammar in collaboration with, that's not the right word, is it? In the context of skills, together with skills.
Mm-hmm.
We can't sort of take it out and sort of say, okay, today we're going to learn structure X. No, I mean, you're bound to have some text, etc. But what I mean is, if we think in terms of grammar focused lessons, then our planning of grammar teaching is going to go beyond your simple fill in the blanks approach, which I will come back to later.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my take on that.
Okay, thank you so much. Dan, maybe I can change my next question a little bit.
Okay.
What are some key aspects of grammar focused lessons from an instructional viewpoint?
Okay, all right. So one of them I already mentioned, not teaching it in isolation. In the planning, considering it together with skills, you know, which skill does this structure, grammatical structure, lend itself to better? Shall I use reading as a context? Shall I go for speaking? Shall I use this video and focus on them listening to the language, etc.? The other thing is, well, we already mentioned the word, the context, contextualizing the grammar. And I know you've talked about it a lot on the course so far. So it could be done through situations, stories, whatever it is, video, games, audio, even images, so not necessarily just texts. All of these different techniques that you have been exploring on the course. So contextualizing it through all these wonderful and rich techniques. A third point might be, well, not might be, I think has to be, focusing on meaning, message and concept definitely before form. I know once again you have been emphasizing this on the course. I believe in it wholeheartedly, and this to me is a key aspect of grammar, because if we don't do it that way, what we're doing is we're divorcing form and we're taking away meaning. We're saying, okay, look, this is how we form, you know, the if clause type 2, this is how you use it, etc. But what's the student going to do with that? We need to focus on meaning, we need to focus on how it is used, right? How do we use this? So,
Hocam, just a second. Dave, can you check this? It says the memory is full. Could it be possible? Okay. The phone is still continuing. I have enough memory. We can just cut this part.
Shall I?
We'd have to go back and delete some.
But you can pause it too.
mentioned.
You mentioned what?
So I need to make it smooth, right? So maybe you were looking at me, I don't know.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we can. Should we start the question again?
No.
Yeah, we were looking at you, I guess. And
Okay, so another one. I mean, we're talking about the key aspects. So I'm sure there's others, but to me these are the key. So another one is focusing on language use, as I said, but also looking at real language. How is real language used? Now this brings in the idea of authentic materials, of course. It's not like the old times when we had limited access to authentic materials and real language. Now it's everywhere. It's in the news, it's on so many websites, it's on YouTube. So, how can we not exploit that? It's on things like Netflix, whatever else, the others, all those types of platforms. So I think students would and they do benefit greatly from seeing real language, and it boosts their confidence as well. I'm going to talk about that later as well when I talk about my teaching. When you bring a piece of authentic material to them, maybe just slightly adapted or not adapted at all, and you say, guys, do you know this is from yesterday's article on BBC News? And they're like really surprised, Okay, so let me not get carried away there. And maybe a final point in terms of key aspects from an instructional point of view. I think this is probably one of my main messages in this whole, what did you call it? Bringing it together session. We really need to get away from a fill-in-the-blanks grammar teaching approach, if we can call it teaching. It's sad to see pages and pages of materials being photocopied with only fill-in-the-blanks exercises. Still to this day, it happens. Now, I'm not suggesting that fill-in-the-blanks is bad, okay? Of course, there's a place for it. However, when we have so many alternative task types, like complete this sentence using X structure, isn't that more meaningful? Also from the student's learning perspective, they need to be able to understand and use the language in order to do that. Whereas when we have a fill in the blanks and the verb in brackets or whatever it is we have in brackets, and they have to change that, they really need to focus on the surrounding co-text? So as teachers, I think it's really important we question what type of fill in the blanks tasks we use. So sentence, could be sentence formation, sentence completion, if we want controlled practice, because there could be a counter argument by teachers quite rightly saying, okay, but what are we going to use for controlled practice? Well, again, have sentence completion, get them to form sentences with using the structures, etc. And I'm sure you've explored examples on the course. So those are my key aspects for the instructional
I'd like to make a comment on controlled or mechanical practice, and we believe that they can be meaningful as well, and we covered that in our sessions.
Absolutely, I agree.
I think that one of the key things to avoid is those kind of decontextualized, separated sentences, which,
yes, and sorry, go ahead. No, it's worse when it's only sentences as well.
Not contextualized.
And limited sentences. So you're like, well, this could be anything. It could be future tense, it could be past tense.
This discussion brings us to assessment as well, but we won't cover this here. We are talking about grammar, learning and teaching. So
come to assessment
later. Okay. We'll come to it later.
And yeah, so Dennis, you've also, of course, been involved in observing lessons for many years. Would you like to share any kind of suggestions with our colleagues?
Well, I would actually. In fact, what I've just said in response to the instructional viewpoint, in terms of key aspects, I think is really similar to the good examples I observe in the lesson observations. So I'm not teaching in isolation, i.e. incorporating grammar into skills teaching and this idea of grammar-focused lessons rather than I'm teaching grammar today. No, we're not teaching grammar today. We're teaching also content. Sorry, I'm glad I remembered that. The content, again, not just the skills, but what is the content, exploiting the content. So that's one of them from the observations. Effective grammar lessons also have this idea of both co-text and context through the techniques that examples of which I've just shared and you guys have definitely exploited on the course. The meaning aspect, the language use aspect comes in very strongly in effective lessons that I see through observations. And maybe one additional thing that I see is strong grammar lessons are more like focused on guided discovery. And the structure isn't given to students immediately. Even if there's a focus on meaning and message, which, okay. But on top of that, for example, there's, let's say, a short text or even a longer text that contains the grammar structure, right? Let's say this is past perfect. The structure is not underlined in the text. Now, that is perfect because it gives the teacher an opportunity to get the students to do a whole load of other things before even focusing on form. It's a perfect example of what we mean by grammar-focused lessons. So you've got your text, ask some comprehension questions, ask a few other things, if relevant, discuss one or two things related to the content, and then say, okay, let's have a look at this text again. Are there any structures in this text, grammar structures, that you can see that are sort of repeated? And from there you could be diving into or moving into the focusing on the structure itself, the form itself. So do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
This is going to help to benefit in terms of developing independent learning skills as well, and be able to
Absolutely.
see the patterns for themselves.
Absolutely.
So I think it's something that's crucial that we've touched on as much as we can in the course.
In many sessions. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yes, sure. Oh, sorry, maybe one more thing. The presentation, practice production, PPP, that I'm sure you introduced earlier. In terms of, so the question was, okay, any suggestions based on the observations? Again, another thing I see that, okay, PPP to me is very useful in teaching grammar, but we don't always have to do presentation, practice, production. We could have alternative ways of doing it. We could dive in with a production to see how much they already know, to diagnose even. I'll come back to this later as well. Or start off with practice, and it doesn't necessarily have to follow that pattern. So in effective grammar teaching lessons, again, this is something I see. It doesn't have to be, okay, today I'm going to present X, now we're moving on to practice, blah, blah, blah.
And there is one dilemma there. When teachers spend so much time on presentation and mechanical practice, there is no time for production, which is the most important aspect.
Absolutely, or less time even for practice.
Yes.
Yeah, that is an issue.
And as grammar instructors, it gives us much more freedom to be kind of creative in the way that we're guiding our students through the learning process.
Yeah.
So that's part of the fun of it, right? And
Yes.
makes grammar instruction more
That's true.
more of a challenge, but more more engaging and interesting to prepare the lessons.
Absolutely, yes.
And maybe I can make one more addition to what you said about content, context, and meaning form. We use one part of your lesson as an example to personalization. So personalization is also a very important aspect
Definitely.
of learning, probably.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned it. That is key.
Yeah.
How does the student relate to the language? What will the student be able to express through this new structure that they've learned? Excellent point, yes, I forgot that. Personalization. That should also be under key aspects of grammar lessons from an instructional point of view. And it also goes hand in hand with language use. What are they going to use it for?
Yes.
And personalization and use. Thank you
Okay.
for mentioning that.
Thank you, Deniz. Maybe we can talk about now your own grammar focus lessons now. And are there any key points you consider when you plan your grammar focus lessons?
Okay, all right. I actually like teaching grammar in terms of grammar. I didn't word that well, did I? I like teaching grammar in the way that I expressed in terms of grammar focused lessons, okay? And I always challenge myself. I have to have authentic materials in there. I have to have, if not exciting, interesting context in there. I have to have co-text in there if it's more mechanical or controlled practice. I also sort of try and consider both recognition and production. So at some stage, especially with lower proficiency level learners, I try and make sure there's recognition through the text, through a video, through a short article, through speaking, through my own, say, storytelling or anecdote or whatever. So that is key to me. One thing that I think I'm doing more of in the last few years is trying to explore what students already know in terms of grammar. And that is because, as years go by, we are getting less and less real beginners, even false beginners. A lot of students come to us. Of course, we're talking about university, teaching at university level here. So in schools, there might be slightly different situations. But even there, students change schools. They come from one school to another school. So I think it's always useful to see what they already know or may know. But when I say this, I don't mean test, teach, test. I don't know if you focused on this. I think it's a bit unfortunate the way it is named. I mean, okay, God knows how long ago it was named, but it's not for testing. Test, teach, test suggests test them, teach them, then test them again. No, I mean exploring, finding out what they already know. So for example, this past semester with my Route 2 students, so Route 2 for our teachers, I think A2 maybe, according to CEFR, so A2 level students. And in the program, we had past simple. It was just the grammar, right? Not grammar focused. So I went in and to be honest, I didn't really think much about it in my planning because I knew I was gonna go in and tell them a story, a real story of me and my husband meeting Tarkan, right? So
it's a real story.
It's a real
Tarkan
story.
is your son, by the way.
Yeah, but this is meeting the singer Tarkan.
Oh.
Tarkan, that's my son. I didn't meet my son. Well, I did meet him, but anyway.
For the first time, I thought.
So, I mean, meeting in person. Anyway, I'm not going to go into the story. Some of our viewers may already know the story because I talk about it everywhere. But anyway, and it was this classroom, by the way. I sent half of the students out. I said, wait for 5 minutes in the corridor, don't disappear. The remaining half were in class, and I told them the story in a nutshell, and then I sent them out, brought the others in. I told them the same story, but with a few differences. So when they all got back together, the idea was, and I didn't even say to them, hey, today we're going to learn the past simple. They retold the story. I paired them up according to, you know what, the stories they'd heard, so group A, group B. And they had to share the version they heard with each other and find the three differences. And I thought, you know, I was really happy with this, and I had done used similar techniques before. So this is something, for example, that helps us use context, allows us to see how much students already know, and you can do it, by the way, even with present simple. Because simple present, the good old simple present that is always in Unit 1 of whatever course book, is also used for narration, isn't it? So simple present for historical past. So there you go. You could say, okay, so we are there waiting for Tarkan to arrive, and then a security officer calls us to go over to him, etc., etc. So present simple, the same thing could be done.
Yes.
So what happens is you then see and hear how much students already know, are able to do, and how much maybe teaching you need to do in terms of the grammar itself. Will it be first time? Probably not. It will probably be remedial grammar teaching for a lot of the grammar structures, okay? So this is one example. How did I get on to Tarkan? I don't know now, but
One of your
and by the way, I think, you know, I want to mention this, and maybe some of our colleagues here might experiment with this, arkadaşlar. You know how we as teachers are always upset about S, you forgot the third person singular, S, işte he goes, she walks, whatever. So maybe what I've just said in terms of using present simple for historic past could be an idea we could introduce even at very, very early stages, but in the third person singular. Before I go, you know, I am, I live in, no. Deniz lives in Istanbul. She loves, even before, you know. I'm getting carried away here, but you can see my excitement. Okay, and I really don't remember how I
explore
wrote
what
it.
students know. And
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll give you another example. It doesn't have to be with tenses. Let's take relative clauses, right? Relative pronouns. I mean, we could give them okay, so you have a friend who's going to come over from Japan. He's with you now, and you're touring Istanbul, and he asks you some interesting questions, and you're like, well, how is he asking me that? So he asks you, what is buffet? What is kıraathane? What is simit? So he's seen it, simit sarayı, right? What is simit? And maybe some other, you know, specific things specific to Turkey and Turkish culture and food like that. How would you describe it to him? What would you say? What is it? What is a simit? What is kıraathane? What is a buffet? And as you know, they don't need to write it necessarily. You could get them to write it, or they could just talk about it. So you will get to see how much they already know. Are they able to use relative pronouns? Maybe some are, maybe some aren't. But at least you'll get a feel for how much they know. So yes, I mean, I do get carried away when it's this sort of thing. Okay, what else? The others I've already talked about, like authentic materials, meaning focus, etc. I did talk about guided discovery as well, and maybe I should finish with that. I mean, this interview has come at a very interesting time, because yesterday, arkadaşlar, I was going through folders of materials, hard copy, not related to grammar, you know, just in my office. And as I was doing that, getting rid of some stuff to open up space for my other stuff, I came across this material which myself and my elder sister, who is also a teacher and a trainer, had been looking for very long years. And the material is, the reason why we had been looking for it is because it was a perfect example of a guided discovery approach to grammar. And my colleagues here just saw it as well. Nereye koydum ben onu bakayım? Okay, it's here. Don't worry if you can't see it. I'm just going to show it for our colleagues to see how old it looks. Okay, so this is actually from a course book way back in 1982.
Before I was born.
Before you were born. You don't tell me exactly, Dave. Hayret bir şey. Neyse, we are proud, aren't we? 1982, my dear, was the year I started university.
Oh, wow.
Okay, was it? Yes, it was. Okay, so sorry, not to diverge. So this material, now, this is very special, and you have exploited guided discovery, you have talked about inductive approaches and all of that. So this material is going to give our teachers even a further opportunity to look at how guided discovery can work in context using not a very long text. You can see, you know, it's okay, small print, but probably maximum one A4.
And don't worry, we will attach it to.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. My lovely colleagues here, Nezaket and Dave, will know exactly where to use this, and here you also have the task to go with it. So I hope you enjoy that, arkadaşlar, and I hope this has been useful. Thanks so much for your questions. Do you have any other questions, by the way? I don't know if...
Thank you so much, but I'd like to just highlight something you said.
Sure.
Test, teach, test. Yeah, we covered it in one of our sessions.
Uh-huh.
But as you said, test there doesn't mean test assessment. It is used for diagnostic purposes, just to see what they know.
That's right. Still, I think the name is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because it gives this idea of, you know, I'm gonna see what you know. Whereas with, you know, the way I see it is, let me explore, let me see what they know.
Explore would be a better word for it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, dear Züleyha.